We'll start the show in just a minute, but first, a word from our premier brand sponsor, OwnerPoint.
My name is Brandon Thomas. I work with Moose Management Vacation Rentals. We manage about over 165 properties in the Park City, Utah area. We've been using OwnerPoint, I would say, probably for the last 3 years. The challenges we faced before OwnerPoint were challenges on the CRM level. So getting back to our responses, our incoming owners, and really just our advertisement in general. We specifically use OwnerPoint to acquire new owners. And not only that, but keep it in a local area for us all to be able to access their contact information, when their birthdays are, when they contacted us last, you name it, it's our central hub. Our whole office loves using their AI tool, Genie. It is one of the best tools for property managers. It helps respond to guests that are unruly. It helps respond to reviews. It helps us respond to just any and all questions that seem a little bit difficult. The marketing campaigns have really pushed our normal postcards to the next level. They're able to have map tagging and certain different tags. Every day I can go through and find somebody who's purchased a new home, and I can send them an email, a QR code, whatever it may be, a postcard, and they're able to take care of it for us. The way OwnerPoint has made my life easier is unbelievable. The amount of running around and chasing I was doing before OwnerPoint has really slimmed to minor here or there. Everything's in one spot. Everybody is taken care of with their automations and their easy to read platforms. It's one of the best products I've ever used. I would recommend OwnerPoint to everyone and anyone outside of my area. I don't want anybody to grow as much as I did for that quickly. No, but for real, anybody looking to grow their property management business should be using OwnerPoint, ContactPoint, Genie. All of their tools and marketing solutions are really the top of the line.
Ready to start growing your inventory and bringing in new properties? Head over to ownerpoint.io/Alex and Annie to see how they can help your business thrive.
That's ownerpoint.io/Alex-and-Annie, where you can turn leads into long-term relationships and grow your property management business.
Now back to the show.
Welcome to Alex Dating, the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. I'm Alex.
And I'm Annie.
And we are joined today with Ian Carter, who is the former CEO of Hilton International and currently is the chair of the board for the Watchers of Switzerland Group, Eataly, Boom, which everybody knows, and then also the Boston University School of Hospitality and Administration. What a resume, Ian.
Mouthful, that's for sure.
Thank you so much for joining us. As we talked off camera, we do have listeners that are on the hotel side, but most of our audience is vacation rentals centric. So why don't you talk a little bit about all of these great accolades and titles that you have, what your journey's been like to get you where you are today?
Sure. Well, I, unlike a lot of people in the hospitality industry who I have enormous respect for, I didn't actually start there. I kind of grew up with General Electric. Without getting too obvious on dates and show my age, I worked ultimately at GE for Jack Welch. So I was in my formative years were in the US working for GE. I ran the chemical business as my last job with GE before moving to Black & Decker, where ultimately I was the president of all of the operations outside of America. I was based in London, but I ran Asia, Europe, and South America. 5 fantastic years, and kind of unusually, I guess, I knew one of the board members for Hilton International personally. We were kind of friends. And at that time, which was 2006, 2007, around there, the company was looking for a new CEO. And they made a decision to go outside of the hospitality industry, which was pretty bold at the time, but actually also it was the same thing that IHG did when they appointed Andy Coslet, who came from Cadbury's, which is now part of Hershey's. I was at Black & Decker. I met with the rest of the board and the chair of Hilton International, and we kind of hit it off. And I think my background, which was very disciplined in the sense of financial responsibilities, all of those sorts of things, the training I'd had internationally, was, I guess, either you could say it was a good fit, good opportunity, or it was a risk from their perspective worth taking. So I joined Hilton in 2006-07 as CEO of Hilton International, which at the time was entirely separate from Hilton in America. We had a couple of joint ventures, including the Hilton Honors Program, the loyalty program, the Conrad brand. But basically, Hilton International had separated from Hilton in America some 50 years before, and was responsible essentially for the Hilton brand everywhere outside of America, with a few areas of overlap in South America and Hong Kong. But for the rest, it was two separate companies. And I was very close to the leadership team in America, and they likewise were very close to us here there as it was in the UK. We were listed in the UK. Anyway, I accepted the job, fantastic move, loved the business from day one. Spent my first 90 days visiting as many hotels as possible around the world to ensure I kind of got a feel for how the business was being run. Fantastic team members, great training ground. We had many great stories of people that had joined the business and risen through the ranks through various different jobs and subsequently become general managers in not their home country necessarily, but abroad. So truly international. But it was clear to me at the time that really the two companies should rejoin one way or another. It was kind of suboptimal to have the two brands separate. So we owned a lot of property at the time. In my first year, 18 months, we sold about $6.5 billion worth of property at that time, divested of it all, returned the money to shareholders. It made us attractive to be purchased back by the US. I'm cutting a very long story short here. So Hilton Hotels Corporation purchased Hilton International. And of the team that was at Hilton International, actually I was the only senior person that stayed from the board level. Everybody else kind of went on and did different things. I moved to the US. Our office at the time was in LA. And I, kind of ran all the international operations from LA and got to know the US business. And I commuted every 2 or 3 weeks back to London for a couple of years. Whilst at the same time, we were approached and decided to take the company private with Blackstone. So that was right around 2009. And we took the company private in the largest private equity deal at that time. And, we spent the next 6 years essentially reshaping the company. So headline numbers, at the time of us going private, we had about 2,500 hotels. By the time we went public, we had 5,000 hotels around the world. And now I think maybe just over the 7,000th hotel, I think, from reading and talking to some of my old colleagues. Most importantly, we took brands that were tremendously successful in the US and started putting them in countries around the world, alongside, of course, the Hilton brand. So Hampton Inn hadn't existed outside of the US. It's now in many, many countries, including China, around the world, as is Hilton Garden Inn, DoubleTree, et cetera, et cetera. So we put the two companies back together, essentially, and internationalized it. We moved from the West Coast to the East Coast, and now the company is headquartered in Northern Virginia. And we had a fantastic time. I did, in particular, helping grow the company, meeting some really interesting and fantastic owners around the world, and, a vast myriad of owners, from individuals through to companies that had invested through REITs, et cetera. So, a massive array of different ways that we grew, and it was just a great time to be in the company. Spin the clock forward a little bit, and COVID hit, and it was a time for me to kind of reflect on whether I wanted to continue doing what I was doing, or I wanted to go try new things. And I'd always planned to do this during my period as running the international business at Hilton. I'd been on the board of Burberry for 10, almost 11 years. I chaired Del Frisco's, the restaurant group. For those in the US know the restaurant group pretty well, I'm sure. And so around 2019, I stepped down. It was time for me to step down off the board of Burberry because I'd been doing it for longer than is normal. But I helped with some transitions. I took with the team Del Frisco's private right at the end of 2019, sold the company to El Catterton, and by that time we owned Barcelona and Bartaco as well as Del Frisco's. Del Frisco's ended up with Tillman, and we the El Catterton, which is you probably know the private equity arm of Louis Vuitton, they kept Barcelona and Bartaco. And then COVID hit, and it was a time for me to think, now, do I really want to do that kind of full-time exec role, or should I take some of what I've learned and see if I can help other companies if they want my help? And I decided to do that. I was approached and in discussion with a number of different companies as to whether I could help and play a role. I loved the opportunity that was presented to me for Watches of Switzerland. Watches of Switzerland, if you don't know it, is the largest retailer in the world of Swiss-made watches, the largest Rolex dealer in the world, largest Patek dealer in the world, largest Audemars Piguet, for example. You name the brand, it's the largest. Stores in the UK and across the US. We own multiple brands. brands, retail brands in the US. Anyone who's in Florida, we own Mayors, for example. If you're in Connecticut, we own Betteridge. If you're in Aspinall Vale, we also own Betteridge there. So we trade under various different names, but it's a very well-established, well-known UK-listed PLC. It's also the jeweler to the crown, meaning it's responsible for the crown jewels in the UK. So we have this fantastic history steeped in connections to the royal family. We hold that one of our companies, it's called Mappin & Webb, holds the royal warrant. So when you saw King Charles inaugurated, that the crown was refitted by us in private, in secret, to him rather than his mother. So it's a very special company and obviously fantastic retail footprint. I met with the CEO and the rest of the board. We all kind of got on and said, look, I think I can help, and I really wanted to join. So I joined the company as chair about 3 years ago, and we've been growing inorganically and organically through acquisition, and subsequently have really enjoyed my time on the board of Watches of Switzerland. More recently, before Christmas, I joined the board of Eataly, Invest Industrial, a large private equity company out of Italy, based between Italy and London and Switzerland, had bought the company. It was a private-to-private transaction. It's an incredible company if you don't know it. We have, I think, in the US now, 9 or so retail outlets with restaurants. That's the kind of unique feature of this business. We have them in Canada, we have them in South America, we have them across Europe and in Asia and the Middle East, close to 60 worldwide. A typical example would be Flatiron in New York. We have 75,000 foot facility that sells Italian produce of the highest quality, has a coffee shop, a gelato bar, 4 restaurants, a roof bar with a fabulous 200-seat restaurant. And we have something like that in Chicago, in LA, in Dallas, and multiple cities around the world. It's a really great business. Obviously, my background in hospitality and in restaurants with Del Frisco's made this attractive to me. The team at Invest Industrial, in particular, the partners, the founders, are really great. They understand brands, they understand luxury in particular. So that's been great. I'm really getting up to speed on all of that business now. We've formed a board in the US and just taking the business now to the next level of growth with openings in, we've got multiple openings coming, but since I'm in Florida, I can tell you that we're opening in Aventura very soon at the big mall there. And we've just signed a new lease to open a new facility in West Palm Beach in a fabulous location. And there'll be more of those coming, of course. With that, I've really spent the last 3 years working with private equity on one hand and with larger brands in the retail hospitality space. I've been involved in Boston University for a long time, and I became chair, I think 4 years ago. Fabulous school, really focusing on innovation within hospitality to kind of differentiate from some of the other big schools that have hospitality schools. I was there just last week, actually, for a board meeting at a fabulous time. We inaugurated the new president of Boston University, so it was a really momentous occasion. And I spent time there with the dean and the team, really helping them shape kind of the strategy over the next few years. So that's kind of the formal stuff. As we're really going to talk about today, Boom came around kind of in an unusual way, in that through my family, in particular through my daughter's boyfriend, we have invested in single-family homes for rental market, for short-term rental. And as we were doing this, and this was in fact South Florida, we came across Boom as we started to think about how do we want to manage these properties in the most efficient, professional way if we ultimately want to attract institutional capital. So it's not the idea of having just one or two. The idea of having many requires a systematic approach and really needs some professional systemization in order to be able to present, a strategy that says this is duplicative across multiple properties. It also applies to one, but our view was we want to have a number of these. How are we going to do this efficiently? And we came across Boom, literally by chance, and I met with Shahar and really liked what he had to say. I went to his office actually to understand what I guess, I don't know whether he calls it this, but to me it looked like this nerve center. He's got screens everywhere.
Yeah.
And so we liked what we saw. We became a customer. And then he kind of took it to the next level and showed me what they were doing in preparation at this point. We're there now, but in preparation to introduce AI into the equation. So not just a property management system, but AI property management. So I really liked what I saw at that point and said 2 things. Look, if I can help, I'm happy to help. Secondly, I'd like to invest in the company. So I did both in the end. And I've been now involved with Shahar for 6 months or so, as we think about where to take the business next. And he and his team, who are a great mix of people that are both software developers and just smart marketeers, etc., that can really help take the company to the next level. But frankly, it was a need we had. We found him. Secondly, more convincingly, was he was in this space before us and had the same need, and so developed technology for himself as well as for potentially for others. So, kind of born out of his own need, he developed Boom, and that brings us to today.
Yeah. Wow. What a history, and so many different parts of business that you've seen, between, the retail to luxury brands to restaurants and tourism. I mean, just so many different things there. But I have a million questions. I'm not sure where to begin on
Yeah.
it, to be honest. But I think it's interesting from you seeing the side of hospitality of hotels. And, we talk about the professionalism of hotels versus vacation rentals a lot on our show. And that's just kind of an ongoing topic and storyline within our industry. Andy worked for Marriott Homes and Villas for a little bit over a year on their side as they tried to get into the vacation rental segment. But I'm just curious, I mean, from your experience running in the hotel side to now what you've learned in kind of the last 6 months about the vacation rental side, short-term rental side of the business, what are the main differences that you see from your lens of what you've seen on the other side?
Well, I won't speak to all of the other brands, but if you're at Hilton or Marriott or IHG, a large portion of your business is business traveler. A lot of cases, conferences and business meetings. Typically that's not what we have in short-term rental. It's almost kind of completely the reverse, and particularly in the areas we were involved, where it's really genuinely is vacation. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, of course, it's very diffuse. Although a number of the big guys are trying to aggregate through loyalty programs, etc., the ability to sell to short-term rental market, which, by the way, I think is a smart thing to do, potentially, get that, if you can break that code. But they're the main differences, I think. And what I like about the short-term rental market, and this is a personal thing, be it I come from a big hotel company, I personally, when I'm traveling on leisure, I prefer something that's more unique and local. And there's nothing more unique and local than a short-term rental.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Always for me, for example, now I can have stayed anywhere I want to stay, as it were, when I'm traveling. If I'm traveling, I tend to stay in boutique hotels or small hotels. I want to understand what makes them tick, what makes them unique. Short-term rental is a microcosm of that, and that's what I like about it. You can be really, really local and really unique. If the short-term rental is run in the right way, you still get the professionalism of being in a well-executed, large, well-resourced hotel.
So I have a question related to the standards and again, where Alex is talking about, we talk about this all the time. Like, how do we infuse the standards that people know they're going to get when they stay in a hotel brand? They stay at, an IHG, a Hilton, or a Marriott. They know they're going to get a specific type of service depending on the brand that they choose. And so there's always been this conversation of like, how do we instill that same trust and that same expectation, or deliver on the expectation that the consumer has? Do you think that it's feasible to do within our industry?
Yeah, I think it is, but it boils down to personal commitment from the owners. I mean, that is, because some people might simply say, look, I just want a transactional relationship on this, a short-term rental. It's going to be people in, people out. I'm not offering anything unique or special here. It's just, a volume production, as it were. But I think on many, and what we've seen, I think where you look for, the highest ADRs, etc., is it's going that extra mile. And that extra mile can be, of course, within the physical asset. You can put a swimming pool. You can have a swimming pool, but you have lots of toys in the swimming pool, as an example. You have a barbecue, but what kind of barbecue? All of those things, can add to A, the capital, but B, the potential for the ADR. And there's always a investment return discussion that needs to be assessed by the owner. So let's assume people can make that calculation. I think beyond that, then it's down to the personal delivery of the service. And actually, this is where I thought really long and hard about how AI can play. Because there's a fine line between personalization and personal interaction versus the ability to do things efficiently and not be, frankly, a pain in the ass, if I can say.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, I don't like getting a million emails before I arrive somewhere. You have to understand that balance. The second thing might be, I decide kind of what's useful, because it's down to me when I'm staying somewhere to define what my need is. Now, that makes it tricky for the owner, and that's why I think AI helps. A simple example, when I first saw one of these AI, one of Shahar's working examples he showed me for the use of AI was, I'm staying in a particular property, and let's say the owner has 30 properties, 20 properties, doesn't matter. They manage a lot of properties, let's say. So, one of the most difficult things would be, what do I, as an owner, want to be involved in when there's a problem? And often case, it could be, I get a phone call at 9 p.m. at night on a Friday and I'm at dinner because the guest has a question. And if I'm managing that property, I'm the one responsible. Now with AI, depending of course on how sophisticated the AI is, and it can be massively sophisticated now, a lot of that interaction can be real time, very productive, and very, very focused on solving a problem. The guest is in the property and says, hey, I have a problem with the swimming pool. It doesn't seem to be heating up. I'm making this up. So I'm going to call the manager or the owner. Well, let's assume that the app is sophisticated enough to say, I just simply say, problem with the pool, right? The AI, and I'm really simplifying this, but the AI can not only respond to that in a meaningful way, but it can also ensure that an immediate email or text is sent to the pool person, copying the owner if the owner wants to be on copy, telling them to fix it now. Because they're on a contract, let's assume that it ensures 24-hour call out. I'm using that as a kind of extreme example, but the point being that all falls back on the quality of the service, ultimately, responsiveness of the owner to the guest. In the same way at a hotel, if you have a problem with your airco, typically you get a front desk and say, hey, my airco's not working, whatever. They'll send up an engineer. So in this case, it's not as simple as doing that potentially with the owner of a property in short-term rental. It needs to be more sophisticated. And I think, again, Shahar and the team saw that and said, okay, we need to come up with something smarter, able to be repeatable and sophisticated enough that the guest feels like they're getting dealt with in the right way, and is taking out manual interaction that could be unproductive. And of course, then it can be repeatable. So I gave you an example where customer service is involved, but then if you think about what happens in that particular instance, a transaction results in a bill. Well, that could be automatically generated back through the PMS system, and using AI will respond to the guy that fixed the pool. It populates a receivable, a billable, when that's paid, etc., and it populates your accounts such that you're ready to produce a P&L ready for your accountant. Again, I'm exaggerating for effect here. Going back to your original question, Annie, it's difficult to be as formulaic as in a hotel because you've typically got 200 or 300 rooms in one block. But it's all about response, understanding the guest needs and being as focused on immediacy so that problems are solved if they arise as quickly as possible. Conversely, also, though, be productive, and it can be suggestions. It could be that the person staying at the short-term rental says, God, I'd really love to go for a fantastic Asian fusion. Rather than it be printed out on a list, or I go and do my search, which I might still choose to do. I go and do my search on Yelp or something. That could be an interaction again through the system.
We'll be back in just a minute after a word from our premier brand sponsor, Boom.
My name is Richard Marshall. The company that I own is called Knox Cape Town. We have approximately 200 villas, and all in the 4-star, 5-star, and ultra luxurious segment. Most of the solutions in the industry were focused on managing a property, but not managing a business. And the thing that really stood out to me about Boom was that it gave us the ability as business owners to zoom out and take a 30,000-foot view of the business and look at how are my staff performing. We had a huge problem with guest communications post-arrival. So the solution that Boom had in place with centralized communication was invaluable for us. It enabled us to massively improve our client communications. When Boom informed me that their AI was up and running and ready for prime time, I was very skeptical, to be honest. Clients are very demanding clients. We deal in the premium end of the market. So I was nervous to give free rein to the AI. So we started with a very gradual approach towards AI, where initially everything was just done on a co-pilot basis, where to the point now where we've allowed it to handle our customer service inquiries on an autopilot basis. The feedback from property owners since we've moved across to Boom and has been nothing but positive. Boom allows them to get the information that they need to feel comfortable that they know exactly what's happening in the property. So I'm a huge promoter of Boom, and I would certainly recommend it to all my friends and colleagues. I've personally seen from Boom is how it has really helped me to get my finger on the pulse of the business, see how my business is performing in detail. And I've seen what a big impact it's made, not only on our guest experience, but also on the staff experience. So I'd certainly recommend anyone taking a look.
Head over to boomnow.com to see a demo of this revolutionary software, and be sure to include that you heard about Boom on the Alex and Annie podcast. Our listeners receive 50% off onboarding fees, and the first month is free. Go to boomnow.com and see for yourself how AI is revolutionizing the future of property management systems.
I think it's difficult to be as repeatable as a hotel just simply because of the volumes involved, but it's also very possible to be quite personal, which is actually, I think, what people want, but personal when they want it rather than in your face.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's such a complicated business that we all work in, and it's like, at the end of the day, I think you're spot on that it's the ownership has to understand and have value and weight on the importance of executing on those standards and making sure that things are done the way that they need to, and implementing the right technology that's going to enable them to be able to do that. Because at the end of the day, this business is so complicated because there is so much manual work that has to go with it. And it's like the people that, if you're really leaning hard against using technology and AI and these things, you can still get the job done. But if it's 9 o'clock on that Friday and you want to have a life, it's really hard because you're constantly being pulled in a million directions. So, I think the more you can lean in, the better.
The question of being productive as well. I mean, in the sense that productive and reactive in a good way. And again, what I mean by that is, there's no point in me sending a text if I don't get an answer till the next day. I expect something immediate. And the beauty of the potential of AI is it's immediate. It's not an immediate, got your text. It's an immediate, okay, just define specifically what the issue is before I make a call out. Or I'm making the verbiage up, but that's how sophisticated it can be rather than just, yep, we got your note.
Well, and there's not a one size fits all way to respond to guests. And I actually just commented this on one of Simon Lehman's posts earlier today, that he was talking about their guest journey and how, you want to make sure that you are getting information to people in any capacity of how they're going to consume it. And I said that I agreed, but I think the one thing our industry has not gotten right yet is being able to figure out initially from that guest, how do they want to be communicated with? Because you have to be able to communicate all the different ways. But if they only want to be talked to via a text message or WhatsApp or email, whichever their choices, then that's how the flow should continue for them.
Yeah, I know in the hospitality industry, I can't speak in a blanket way, but sometimes it's underestimated how important that first question is how would you like us to respond to you? And it's the same, by the way, same in retail, even in luxury retail. I mean, some of the worst things about luxury retail is, one of the worst things I think is that, this is probably not a technical term, but I call hoverers. So, you go in and someone's hovering around you because they're trying to figure out, should I step in and direct you, or should I just wait for you to ask me a question?
Right.
Yeah.
It's often easy just simply say, is there anything I can help you with right now? And if not, I'm over here.
I'm here if you need me. Yeah.
That's it. So you ask the question rather than kind of hover.
So interestingly, just with all you were just saying, you think that our opportunity in standardization is more on the communication level than it is actually going into the units and having, again, like hotel linens and specific soaps and those type of things?
Yes. I think the personalization and the opportunity is not just the interaction, but also all of the kind of the back of house in any system, like sort of PMS system per se. There may be opportunity in some standardization. The question is, I think, is any particular owner looking to have scale? In other words, what I mean by that is, if you have 4 or 5 properties and you're trying to make them, for want of a better description, a collection, then you might want to have some consistencies, But I think it's all that's a function of scale, and it's the same, by the way, in hotel business, right? You take even the smallest brands; they will aim to have some brand standards so that there's consistency. So if a person stays at the standard in New York, it's going to be the same as roughly the same apart from location, the standard in Miami or the standard in LA. The same could be said for a short-term rental group collection or a collective. But I don't think it's essential unless you really think that's going to drive loyalty and, there is some extra benefit to doing it. There may be a benefit on the purchasing side, of course, but if there a benefit on the guest side to say, okay, I'm always going to stay with this particular collection of short-term rentals because I love their linens and I love their soaps. Otherwise, I think actually part of the sell and the uniqueness of short-term rental is it is unique. Each one is a bit different.
Yeah. It's a collection of boutique hotels. And how do you tie them all together? Yeah, absolutely.
Collection of different marbles.
Yeah.
I'm interested too, Ian. I mean, I have a lot of experience of taking public companies private, and just curious your thoughts on what has happened within the vacation rental space as far as the companies that have gone public. And we've seen that not go so well in some cases, but I mean, what would be your take on that for our industry?
Something I learned certainly in public-private, whether you're public or private, is you got to kind of figure out what's most important to you in either state. So if you want to go public because you're looking to raise capital and grow, then that might be the best route for you because your existing shareholding or existing investors in the private and the private world may just not simply have enough cash to be able to help you go do that, but you will believe that's the right route. Conversely, the public markets operate very different. As a public company, you're under different pressures than you are private. And I've obviously I've sat both sides of the fence, and I've sat both sides of the fence in America and in Europe. And in Europe, you have to operate in a very specific way, not just with quarterly earnings, but the number of board meetings you have, the number of people you have on the board, the diversity of the boards, and all of which is good, by the way. It's very formalized. In the UK, there is a review done a number of years ago called the Cadbury Act, and that actually enforced certain standards that were put in place on the way companies operate. I, as a chair, can't be a chair for longer than 9 years. Then you're considered an insider, so you have to rotate. In the US, that's not the case. You can be the chair of a company for 30 years. I'm a non-executive chair, for example, which is considered to be more a generally good practice in the UK because I'm not running the day-to-day of the company. In America, you can be a chair and be an executive. I'm not saying either is right or wrong, but they're quite different. And that puts different pressures on the companies. The one commonality being public versus private is that generally speaking, public companies are measured quarterly. And a quarterly measurement can be quite tough, especially if you're a growing business and you're trying to persuade the markets that actually the best is ahead and we need to be showing growth, not in a quarter, but in a year or in 2 years. The public markets are not particularly forgiving. They may buy that story for a little while and they say, okay, that's good. But then they suddenly think, well, no, you know what? I want to see either A, the share price go up, or B, you should start paying dividends, or you should do a share buyback, or, they have their own pressures as shareholders, many of whom are, as pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. And, so the public markets are, there's some very good things about it, but there's some tough things about it. You got to know what you're getting into. Privately, of course, there are some restrictions potentially in terms of access to capital, maybe not, but you're not measured, as tough a way potentially based upon who your shareholding base may be. So unfortunately, I don't think there's any one thing fits all. I do think there's often case a function of time, meaning sometimes a company might be better off being private at a certain point in time in their history. When I chaired Del Frisco's, I was the first chair as a public company. But over time, we realized we weren't being rewarded, we thought, for our story as a public company. It was better to be private, so we took it private again. I think there's also now a growing question of where you list as a public company if you have a choice. The US markets, there's greater access to capital, there's greater fluidity in shareholdings versus the UK, for example, which is much tougher public market right now.
There's been the conversation about the companies within the short-term rental, vacations rental space that have gone public or planning to go public. And there's always this, there's often this side conversation that says, well, when they do that, they lose the charm of what the industry is because now they're beholden to a completely different set of rules. And to your point, quarterly earnings where, vacation rentals and short-term rentals is pretty seasonal. I mean, it's it's not very balanced as much as I think like the hotel businesses where they can manage their inventory and manage their occupancy based on a lot of factors where, you mentioned at the beginning, vacation rental is really about vacations. It's not about the corporate business traveler who's traveling all the time. So do you think that there is room for more people in this space to go in the public sector, or do you think that being private is where they have a best opportunity for success?
Again, without being too specific on any particular company, I think it's a function of what the investors really want. And again, what I mean by that is you go back to the benefits of being private are you're not under those same public company pressures that you mentioned and I mentioned. But the benefits of being public may allow you to grow quicker. So if the objective of that particular entity is to grow faster and have recognition for that, then maybe public is the right way to go. Obviously, when we were private with Blackstone as Hilton, we grew faster than any time in our history, private ownership. But we had a fantastic sponsor, and it was, always with a view at some point that those private sponsors also do need to be rewarded for the risk on the investment. So even being private is not without its pressures. It depends really, I think, on the objective of the company and how best they think they can achieve it. There's lots of different types of private, from individuals to a collective of individuals, through to private equity, through to sovereign wealth. And arguably someone like Four Seasons, who's effectively owned by two large, one sovereign wealth and one private family, that brand can run with a really good, strong view on the very long term, rather than just be worried about what the next quarter looks like specifically. And that can benefit. I mean, it's a philosophical argument as well, I think. I remember one of the first times I went to Japan a long, long time ago, I met with the president of then Toyota. This is when I was with GE. And we were talking about strategy and business, etc. And I said, our 5-year plan is always kind of really, it's, years 1, 2, and 3 we know about. 4 and 5 we don't know so much about because it's too far down the line. And he looked at me and said, we plan in 25-year cycles.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
They take a long-term view of where they want to be. And, I
Wow.
think there's a story talks about, when they launched Lexus, it was with a view to it be competing with, BMW and Mercedes. But they didn't want to do it in the next year. They said, look, if it takes us 10 years, then it'll take us 10 years to be recognized as something that significant. And sometimes, the pressures of being public don't allow that to happen because
Sure.
you're not given that much time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I can't imagine planning anything for the next 25 years in today's day and age. It's unbelievable. But on that point too, I mean, that's so just unbelievable that you got to work with Jack Welch. I'm sure that must have been a wonderful experience in your career. Good to Great's one of my favorite books. But what would you say, what's like one of the biggest lessons that you learned working from him, such a visionary like that?
The one thing I've said this a number of times to other people over the years when we've talked about what I learned at GE, and I think, bear in mind, at the time I was there, it was the biggest company in the world by market cap and, by pretty much any measure. It was big. Microsoft and these guys didn't really exist at that point, so we were the biggest company in the world at that time. We had 13 different businesses. We owned NBC and we owned aircraft engines. So we had it was a conglomerate when in all the textbooks would tell you conglomerates don't work. That was, so it was an anomaly in that respect. It had a huge bank. GE Capital was a massive bank at that time. And that fed our growth. So if you imagine this massive and complex business, I think we had 500,000 people at the time, 500,000 people working for the company around the world. Jack was brilliant at putting great people in positions of importance to make big decisions. And what I mean by that is, he had fantastic HR network, right to the person that reported to him. That HR network went throughout all of those 13 businesses. So my head of HR was linked into the head of HR I was in GE Plastics division, and that person went straight into Jack's HR person. It's a matrix management system, of course, but you imagine this is 25 years ago. So we had great people in really important positions that were making decisions across businesses. On the plus side, you can afford to take a few risks when you've got that bigger business. If he'd made a bad decision about me, it's not going to kill the business. I can leave and he can put someone else in there, and it's not going to cripple the business by any means. So you had this fantastic network of people that were being trained and given positions that weren't necessarily in their obvious wheelhouse, take a risk, and promoted and given opportunity to see whether they could, run with it or fail. So ahead of me in that era was Dave Calhoun, who became, when I was at GE Plastics running my little business, Dave was running Asia for GE Plastics, and he went on to run Boeing. And if you think about Jim McNerney, 3M, and also Boeing at a certain point, a whole cadre of people that were given jobs while Jack was there that, was probably a risk in other businesses, because I certainly didn't have the skill set when he put me in place. I mean, I may have had the foundations, but it was a risk. So I think that was his one really great skill, was this ability to use his network of people-focused leaders around the business to understand where the next level of talent was coming from and move them around the world, across businesses. For many years, the chairman of NBC, Bob Wright, was actually a lawyer, came out of GE Plastics. That was his background. He was a trained lawyer. So, that was, I think, the thing that made Jack stand out. There's all the other things that everybody knows about, that he neutron Jack, he'd make decisions and move and buy things and sell things and everything else. He was great at that as well. But in the end, it boiled down to his ability to take a risk and promote talent early and have his tentacles within the business without you necessarily knowing, whether it's through the finance organization or the HR.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I tried to use those learnings when I was involved in bigger businesses myself. One of the mantras we had was, think global, act local.
Yeah. I love
It's
that.
somewhat trite to say it, but it wasn't. That was it. Even if you're a small business now, the reality is it's still all about the personal interaction at the local level. Just because I happened to be running a particular business didn't mean to say that still the most important transactions were always from a person to a person. And my job as kind of running that business was essentially to allocate resources to make sure we did that in the best way possible.
Yeah. And identify that talent, right?
And be prepared to take risks here and there on people that they may not quite be there, but they're 70% of the way there. Let's take the risk.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, Ian, this has been such a pleasure having you on today. And what an honor for us to have somebody of your career experience here on our show. Truly a pleasure.
We hope to have you back and talk more about your involvement with Boom and in greater detail, but I know you're a busy man. But if anybody would like to get in touch with you and have a conversation, what's the best way to get with you?
Probably the easiest would be through my email, which is ian.carter@eataly.com. That's the easiest one to get me on.
Okay. Well, we'll include that in the show notes. Maybe your LinkedIn too, or any other way that you want people to connect with you.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Great.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if anybody wants to get in touch with Annie and I, you can go to alexandanniepodcast.com. And until next time, thanks for tuning in, everybody.